Now, ever since the ouster of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, Bangladesh has been facing crisis after crisis at multiple fronts, from religio-political violence to factory closures and other economic challenges to the latest where its power supply could be cut to a large extent. Why is that happening and what's the way forward? Let's talk about that. We have with us Veena Sikri, former Indian High Commissioner to Bangladesh, joining us. Good evening to you, Ms. Sikri. What do you make of what's happening in Bangladesh? The power crisis seems to be just symptomatic of an overall economic challenge that Bangladesh seems to be facing?
Regime change that took place on the 5th of August when former Prime Minister left Dhaka, the economic aspect of the crisis in Bangladesh has been getting more and more serious. During the previous 15 years of former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's rule from, beginning 2009 to 2024, the economy had been growing steadily at a pace of 6 to 8% every year, which led to a lot of prosperity, a lot of increased income, and generally a feel-good factor, although there were a lot of problems on the political side. But now, with this crisis, the entire economic structure, which had been so well put together and was going ahead with great success, has begun to fall apart. And what has come to light, for example, is that, say, the Adani power project, which was an excellent power project, 1,600 megawatts to be supplied to Bangladesh, from a power project built in India, but with a dedicated transmission line going all the way to Bangladesh for use in that country. But the bills remain unpaid, and because of that, Gautam Adani has said that he will not be able to supply the power any longer. So this is a big problem that has come before the country, and there's been a sharp decline in availability of power, with the result that the ready-made garments factories, which is a hard core of the economic system of Bangladesh, giving it the prosperity and massive exports, those are operating at a very, very low capacity, sometimes even 30% of the maximum potential of operation. And because of this, there's also, in addition to this, there's a problem of labor, because now once the students have got their way through, protesting and so on. The labor wants to do the same in the factories, the bureaucrats want to do the same in the secretariat, and so there's generally a feeling of protest all around. And because of that, we do see that the factories are under great stress, and economy is coming down. There's already expected to be a sharp...
What would be the impact if the 7th of November deadline is not met by Bangladesh and the power supply, right now it's halved, it's completely cut off?
Well, you see, first of all, the Bangladesh government now owes the Adani Group around more than $800 million. They have been paying, I believe now, in response to the earlier discussions with Mr. Adani, they've been paying something like $18 million a week, but that is too little to get up to the figure of $800 million. And the Adani Group has already cut supply by 50%. They have already announced a 50% supply cut. And
the reason was dollar shortage.
Part of the reason, they do have a foreign exchange crunch, but this was part of what was envisaged when the Adani project was conceived and implemented. Bangladesh has one of its best ever foreign exchange reserves, crossing $40 billion, which was one of the highest ever for Bangladesh. And then suddenly, I think they took a number of maybe one or two incorrect decisions, and the foreign exchange reserves started falling sharply. But then this whole crisis has been compounded by the regime change, which has led the economy in a state of real collapse. And because of that, nobody's looking at it, how to get the money together, how to go to the IMF, how to get the, loans, etc. So because of the political disturbances, the economy has been largely left to itself, and there's been complete chaos. And of course, a group like the Adani Group have said that after 7th November, even the 50% cut will be further deepened, and full power supply will be cut. I think there will be a sharp deterioration in the factory production, because if the power supply is not available, then the factories just will not be able to operate, and there will be a sharp cut in the power supply to individuals, to homes, to schools, to colleges, to medical facilities, and in all, the supply and power cut is going to be a big blow for the Bangladesh economy, because one of the main points on which former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina was able to give economic growth to the country was a focus on increasing power supplies to Bangladesh from India and from other countries.
So clearly the impact will be catastrophic. And what was expected of Muhammad Yunus? He was put in charge of the caretaker government. He's a Nobel laureate himself, a man of economics himself, had a successful, one could say, almost an enterprise which helped a lot of people economically. But has he been able to deliver on what were the expectations from the people, from the students themselves, as to how the country will be managed, not just economically, also socially? The entire society now seems to be in a bit of a strife if you look at what's been happening of late, protests in the streets.
Absolutely. Actually, I think, if I may say so, Professor Muhammad Yunus really does not seem to be in control of the economy of Bangladesh, in control of the political situation either. In fact, it's a completely anarchic situation at the moment, and people are describing it as a mobocracy. The mobs are taking over. And in fact, what has happened is we saw that because the moment that the regime change took place, we found the mobs which are really led by the Jamaat-e-Islami. So behind the front label of Professor Muhammad Yunus, there's the Jamaat-e-Islami and the Hizb ut-Tahrir, which are Islamic radical groups which are in charge and are ruling the economy, ruling the country from behind the seat of power, which is that of Professor Muhammad Yunus. And we saw, for example, that the student wing of the Jamaat-e-Islami surrounded the judges and asked them to step down. They surrounded professors in the universities and asked them to step down. And we saw in the first few weeks an intense attack on the minority communities. We saw there were rapes and killings and abductions and burnings, and a lot of people lost their life and property among all the minorities, the Hindus, which are the largest minority, but also the Buddhists and the Christians. But they took a strong stand and said, no, we are citizens of this country, we will not go, we want our rights. And since then, they have been demanding for their rights, because even though, India took it up very strongly, Prime Minister Modi wrote to Professor Muhammad Yunus about it. Prime Minister Modi spoke about it from the ramparts of Red Fort. He spoke to President Biden about it. Despite all of this, the physical attacks may have stopped, but the economic...
Donald Trump also spoke about it on Diwali.
Yes, and President Trump called it barbaric. He said the attacks on the Hindus have been barbaric, and he called the situation in Bangladesh chaotic. So I think all this is a reflection that really there is no group, as you're showing in your visuals, how these people are marching. They want their rights. They have been charged with sedition. Just because they were carrying, in addition, the Hindu community was carrying the flag of Bangladesh, but also an orange-colored flag, so they've been charged with sedition. We've seen that the Hindu groups in Chittagong, 10,000 to 20,000 of them, in Dhaka as well yesterday, they have been asking for, that the prosecution of the people who have attacked them. They've been asking for a law to protect the rights of the minorities. They've been asking for a Ministry of Minority Affairs. So they've made a list of demands which they have given to the Chief Advisor, Professor Muhammad Yunus. But there is no response at all. And in fact, the government of Professor Muhammad Yunus has been completely dismissive of any of the claims that there is attacks on the Hindu minorities.
Yes.
No, there are only a few. And actually, this is not even communal. This is because of the political situation. Whereas the very...
So a bit of a living in denial is happening. And do you think that he will also continue to live in denial of the fact that there's pressure being built on him and those who are working with him to hold elections as well, especially the Awami League with its allies are saying hold elections in a situation where Bangladesh seems to be caught in a downward spiral?
Yeah, well, you see, the interim government that has been sworn in has been sworn in allegiance, taken its oath in allegiance to the present constitution of Bangladesh. But after that, one would have expected their duty would be to follow the constitution of Bangladesh. On the other hand, they're talking about reforming the constitution, they're talking about electoral reforms. The interim government actually does not have any constitutional status at the moment. And their only job, even in the previous constitution when there was a provision for a caretaker government, their only job is to arrange for elections within 90 days to have free and fair elections. And when the new government comes, they can do whatever decisions they want to take. But as against that, the pressure from the Jamaat Islami and the Islamic radicals is to postpone the election. And Professor Mohammed Yunus has been saying elections only after reforms. Now, how can an interim government take decisions on reforms like constitutional reforms, electoral reforms, economic reforms? This is the job of an elected
It
government.
almost seems that somebody could seek judicial intervention and say that this government has no legitimacy, remove it.
Well, the present mood in Bangladesh is very much to say that where is the constitutional legitimacy for this government? Now, the question of asking for its removal, etc., that I don't know at that stage how that would develop in the next few weeks. But right now, there are a lot of people who are saying, well, earlier it was better before the regime change. And they are worried about the situation now because the economy is going down. There are no signs of election. There are protests not only by the minority community as you are showing, but also by the garment factory workers, by the students. The students is not even a coordinated group. We have the students run by the Islamic wings, the Islamic radical student groups. They seem to be in control, but the other student groups have formed their own party. So even among the students, there is no longer any kind of coordination. It is a very chaotic situation indeed, and one has to wait for a few more days and weeks maybe. One has seen what President Trump has said. Maybe let us see what the election results bring in the USA to see how this will develop further. But certainly, as far as the people of Bangladesh are concerned, there does not seem to be much hope in their hearts for quick elections or for a quick return to normalcy and for a quick return to economic growth.
Yes, it does seem that a lot of things are in motion, but also in suspended animation because of what is supposed to unfold on Tuesday in the US. Thanks a lot for joining us for the moment, Ms. Veena Sikri.